All right, welcome everyone to today's webinar, Unlocking Potential for Strategic Sourcing and Procurement Teams with Supplier 360 Analytics. My name is Kristen Mann. I'm the head of client experience at Stratos Consulting, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Just some quick housekeeping items. Attendee lines are muted as this session is being recorded. This recording will be sent and made available to all attendees after today's session. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can submit them through the Q&A chat functions at the bottom of your Zoom webinar window. There'll be time at the end where our speakers will answer your questions. On today's webinar, we'll hear from Nico Mann, Stratos Consulting CEO and founder. Nico spent his career in technology consulting, having led and delivered over 100 projects for clients across life sciences, retail, manufacturing, and financial services industries. Nico founded Stratos in 2018 to provide data and analytics advisory, implementation, and managed services with an emphasis on the modern data stack. Anthony Patullo serves at the head of data advisor and project delivery at Stratos. For over 10 years, he's led data and analytics advisory and implementation projects for businesses across life sciences, insurance, retail, manufacturing, and higher education industries. And with that, I'll hand it over to Nico now.
Thank you, Kristen. Hey, everyone. Appreciate you all taking the time to join us today. We're excited to share more about Supplier 360 Analytics and what that is. Just want to give a quick overview about who Stratos is as an organization. So first and foremost, we are a data and analytics consultancy, and we really focus on these three pillars here. So if you find yourself going through the early stages of data strategy and data architecture, we can get in there and help you define what your future state looks like. We can help you build out a more robust roadmap on how you can actually get there. And if you're facing any governance challenges in your organization, we can help you refine those processes as well. And then once you're at the point where you say, hey, we're looking for implementing our new data strategy, take advantage of some of the technologies that are out there and putting in these analytical capabilities. We can support you anything from data warehousing to master data management to storytelling with robust visualizations and dashboards. And certainly we're in the mindset of, hey, once you're happy with everything, we'll get out of there, let you own your system. But if you feel like you need additional support once you are live with your new data infrastructure and analytics platform, we're happy to support you from our enablement team with continued focus on adoption, training, documentation, as well as having access to experts within the industry as well. And certainly an emphasis on some of the technologies you see here, like Snowflake's Data Cloud. Now, a little bit about us, but let's talk about what we're going to be focusing on today. So we're going to start off by getting into the challenges that so many of you are likely facing in the procurement and strategic sourcing functions, and just the focus on the challenges around the data and how you actually pull all that data together. And then from there, we want to talk about, well, how do you solve those challenges? What can you do about that to get you in a state where you feel empowered and you have access to the information to be very successful in your function? And then Anthony is going to take us into the details of what we're calling Supplier 360 Analytics, recognizing that you can take a lot of this away with you to your own internal team. There doesn't have to be a dependency on us as an organization. This isn't software we're selling you. We want to show you how you can do this on your own internally. And if you need additional support, we're happy to help you as well. And then from there, we're going to actually see a demo of something we've done in the past for other clients, as well as a case study to learn more about where people have seen successes with these data strategies for supplier analytics. And then we'll close out and have an opportunity to have some questions and answers. So with that, let's get right into the challenges that we're going to be going through today. So the first challenge here, and I'm sure a lot of you are experiencing this, the inability to easily save your company money. Now, within procurement and sourcing, there is always a big emphasis on saving money, certainly a key responsibility there. But we want to highlight the easily part because so many clients that we talk to, people in this space, they say they know how to do it once they actually have access to that information. The challenge is the time it takes to actually compile all of the data that you need to get a holistic view of your suppliers. So thinking about, hey, I need to pull information on how much money we've spent on these suppliers. What's our relationship with them over time? What is the external market saying? Do they have any financial risks associated with them? Is there any litigation? How have other people experienced them in the past? And it takes a lot of time and effort to pull together this information. So emphasis on, yes, you have the right mindset of how to save money, but then when you don't have the time to consistently pull together that data, you then have to start prioritizing where you focus your time and what your strategies are for saving your company monies with a subset of suppliers. Whereas if you had access to all of this data, you could do that in any situation and it just becomes second nature for you because you have access to that data to be empowered in those discussions. So certainly a theme that we're going to talk about today. So moving on to the next challenge. So this naturally plays into your discussions with suppliers. So not having the upper hand in these supplier negotiations. Negotiations on its own can be very challenging. A lot of people don't like being in those situations. I'm sure there's some of you on this webinar who love it and thrive from it, but so many other people are in procurement and sourcing because they want to be a good stakeholder partner, but they don't always like these negotiation situations when they're trying to save money with suppliers or potential suppliers. Now, by having access to data, it really helps you build that confidence to go into those meetings feeling very informed. You have a fundamental understanding on what your relationship looks like with them, what the history, where the success in your organization has been with those suppliers, or lack of success for that matter. And it really allows you to build a more informed and trusted partnership with your suppliers. And that way you see those opportunities where, yeah, they see the value of partnering with you, you with them. And that can certainly help drive those negotiations and cost saving opportunities as well. But if you don't have access to that data, that becomes incredibly challenging because now you always have to be reactive to pull that data together. It's never timely because you have so many things to do on a day-to-day basis. And that can be very challenging then to put yourself in a successful position to negotiate with your suppliers. So going on to the next challenge here. Now, if you think about bringing new suppliers into your organization, this is one of the most fundamental things in that you are a gatekeeper and there's so much responsibility that goes on you as a sourcing lead to bring in qualified suppliers in your organization. Now, you might have people in your company that say, hey, I've worked with this company before. They're great. You're going to love them. You get a lot of good feedback based on research on the internet, but that doesn't really tell you why they're good or what about them is important for you or your philosophy as a sourcing and procurement team at your organization. And that's where qualitative information is incredibly helpful. There's no doubt, but you need more informed information, quantitative data to help you get a more holistic view for these decisions. So you think about, hey, what's going on in their financial history? Have they been acquired by another company? Does that mean they're not going to prioritize me anymore because now they're looking in bigger and better things? Are they going through any litigation? One of the biggest concerns for some of our clients is that they've seen in their industries that companies had brought in suppliers that they thought were qualified, but then they hadn't done the proper research and come to find out they're in these big lawsuits, and that puts so much of their own organization at risk. So you want to be able to find those qualified suppliers, and a lot of that starts with data. And bringing everything together, being in sourcing and procurement, there's a lot of responsibility on you. You're supporting the business, you're key to saving money within the organization, being a good business partner to your stakeholders, but it always feels like you're not getting the respect that you deserve. You're doing so much for the business and helping other people. Yet what we hear from the clients we work with, they always say, well, they're reactive. They say, hey, why haven't you done this for me yet? What's taking so long? Why is this contract not done yet? And it's just this constant bombardment of things that are just, it's always, what have you done for me lately? And people not giving these teams the respect that they deserve. And we're looking to change that. And that's what you're going to hear as part of the solution is that how we bring all this information together to empower you so you can start to be a proactive business partner with your stakeholders and they start looking at you as a strategic partner and somebody who's supporting their initiatives and you come to them with ideas and how to qualify their suppliers or here's a list of better suppliers to focus on based on X, Y, and Z. And it's just you start building a much more trusted relationship when you have access and take advantage of that data. So certainly a number of challenges, but now let's talk about how we can support these challenges, how we can fix them, how we can address them. And Anthony's going to take you through that as part of the solution.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Nico. So really getting into a lot of the challenges that Nico had just discussed, want to get into what the solution is. And as you can imagine, just based on the name of the webinar, it's going to be Supplier 360 Analytics. So first of all, that begs the question, what is Supplier 360 Analytics? So I really like to think of it as that automated 360-degree view of a company's relationship with their suppliers. So what this means is you have a single consolidated set of data and dynamic analytic dashboards that you can really use to track all the important information your company has about your suppliers that is typically going to live in these different systems, as Nico mentioned. So you might have your supplier information, spend information, contract information, maybe even risk information that you're outsourcing externally, all in different places. The goal of Supplier 360 is to pull that all together in a consolidated view that you can use to gain insights out of. So now that we've talked a little bit about what Supplier 360 Analytics is, let's talk about why you might want to implement it at your organization as it relates back to some of these challenges that Nico covered. So first and foremost, a lot of this is going to come down to money. By having all of your supplier data automatically consolidated in one place, you can really take advantage of significant hard and soft savings. So when I say hard savings, a few things that come to mind are one, improved contract negotiations. So having that availability and ability to quickly see, what contracts are expiring, when they're going to be expiring, so you can be proactive in your renewals, rather going in to your meeting with your vendor a week or two ahead of the expiration date. Your vendor has all the leverage in these conversations, and there's really not much you can do. You're kind of scrambling to keep the services that your business partners need to keep the lights on. You can also even get a little bit more proactive where you're starting to look at trends in your contract amounts and terms and starting to see what patterns there are that can help you arm you with some more information to negotiate better terms going forward. Another big hard saving is really this ability to identify redundancies in contracts. Maybe you have different departments paying for different suppliers that are more or less doing the same services. It might be because the head of one department's developed a relationship with one company over time versus another, and you end up paying a lot more money as a company than you really need to. Maybe there's opportunity to work with one preferred supplier, bundle these services together, and ultimately save money for yourselves. The last thing I want to note on this is just even the ability to avoid contract leakage. So easily being able to see, do you have certain vendors that are consistently underperforming the SOWs? Either they're not delivering up to value that they agreed upon, or maybe they are delivering what they've said in what they've agreed upon, but it's taking longer. You're spending more money. There's more change orders that are going on to get what you ultimately need out of it. So having that information to really help better understand where you're spending your money and how to be more effective in that way. From the soft savings standpoint, the area that I really see the biggest impact is being able to get time back for your team. So in a lot of situations, we've seen clients that before they implement a solution like this, they're pulling data from different systems, manually piecing it all together in Excel, creating reports in PowerPoint that anytime something updates, you have to go back in, update the underlying information, republish the report. Very time consuming, and it's either because you have limitations in your systems of having incomplete pieces of the puzzle in different systems, or maybe you do have a sourcing platform that has all your information together in one place, but you're kind of relying on different out-of-the-box canned reports that don't have a lot of customization options to them. So you're kind of struggling from that perspective where you're downloading the data out of these systems and still having to do pivoting and analysis on top of it to ultimately get what's important to you. So that kind of leads into the next reason of why you'd really want to consider Supplier 360 and another benefit. So getting into this, it's really having that ability to position yourself strongly as a procurement or sourcing leader to your business partners. So a lot of clients and stakeholders we've worked with, they're in these meetings, they're getting asked questions frequently. They're live during a meeting or through email of, what's going on with this certain vendor? What's the situation here? And having a set of dynamic real-time dashboards is ultimately going to allow you to answer those questions quickly with information that you trust on the fly, rather than kind of having to go back with the, oh, let me take a look into that, I'll get back to you, and then spending hours or having someone else on your team spend hours or even days cobbling spreadsheets together, hoping one of your VLOOKUPs or other formulas doesn't break, where now you're giving inaccurate information or even outdated information as a result. And the other piece of this is really just that you're taking time that you would have spent on all these efforts, getting it back to your team and allowing yourself to be more proactive versus reactive in your thinking and analysis. So seeing clients kind of shift from that view of having to put out fires and answer questions on the fly now to doing more ad hoc analysis, looking for trends in the informations, seeing what can inform their purchasing strategies, even getting ahead of some of the questions they anticipate the business partners are going to ask, and being able to come into those meetings with their team, prepared to make recommendations just based on all the insights that they've gained. Last reason I want to get into of just the benefit for implementing this solution for sake of time is the all-important area of risk mitigation and compliance. So this is where you have the ability to tie in, maybe you have some of your own internal observations that you're keeping track of as it relates to contracts for your suppliers, maybe even bringing in some external information. So looking at a Dun & Bradstreet or Rapid Ratings as an example, where you're going out, taking some industry information that they're compiling about different organizations and being able to answer some questions like, hey, is this vendor paying all their bills on time? Are they at risk of going bankrupt this year? And ultimately, leading to the important question of, is this the right company for us to be doing business with? So now that we talked about a few of the benefits of implementing Supplier 360, I want to walk through what the overall solution could look like. Getting into an example of the solution architecture, I just wanted to kind of highlight here that this is more meant to be a representative picture of what you might have, but there's certainly a lot of flexibility in terms of what technologies you might be using, the details of how everything is working, and it's going to vary from company to company. So this is by no means meant to be a one size fits all, just meant to be illustrative of what it could be. So going left to right here, so starting with your source data, so you'll have different systems that you're extracting information from, be it a ERP for your financial information. Maybe you're bringing in some T&E information from a Concur or other similar application. You're bringing your contract information from your contract management system or CLM. Maybe you're bringing some IT service management information from a service desk or help desk type tool to see how that relates for your vendors. The external risk information from a Dun & Bradstreet or Rapid Ratings, as I highlighted. And lastly here, just even the idea of a supplier master or MDM solution, which we'll get into a little deeper in the next slide or so, but just want to highlight it here as that key component, bringing all the pieces together. As far as integrating it all together, there's going to be a number of ways to bring this data and ultimately tie it together. I listed a few examples, and it's really all going to depend on what the business needs are, how frequently the information needs to get in, the sources that we're looking at, how data can best be extracted in. So just wanted to list a few examples of how that'll all work. But ultimately, the goal being we're bringing that information from your sources, tying it all together, and bringing it into your Supplier 360 data warehouse. And the idea here is you'll notice, this is almost the largest part of the screen here is the data layer, the Supplier 360 data warehouse. And that's really because we want to highlight how important this piece is, because it's really going to be that underlying engine that's going to power the dashboards and analytics that you're going to do on top of that. So we think of how this works. We're going to be staging information from your sources, doing transformations on top of that, consolidating it, structuring it, merging the data together in the right format that it's ultimately going to be easy to report on at the levels of detail that you need, so that when you do go into your dashboard, you're able to easily understand, how to bring it in, how to do your analysis on top of that. Another piece just I want to highlight here is we're really flexible in terms of which technologies we're using to do this solution. So, listed a few examples out for a data layer. So you think of a Snowflake, Redshift, Oracle as examples there. Want to highlight here, though, there certainly are benefits to going with a more modern tech stack and going more towards that cloud architecture. So I think of even Snowflake as an example here. There's information like Dun & Bradstreet actually has connector in their marketplace where you can go in with a subscription, get data from there, bring it directly into your staging or data warehouse to then merge it into your internal company information, rather than having to go through as many complex APIs, different integrations to tie it all together. So just a call out there where, there are some benefits to considering that modern architecture as you do this. Last piece I want to just call out here is going to be that analytic layer. So this is where you'll have access to the data in a tool like Tableau, Power BI, whichever it is, and ultimately have your dashboard. So a few examples we listed here are your actual Supplier 360 dashboard, which is what we're going to demo today. You might have some administrator dashboards on top of that. Maybe your IT team, analytics center of excellence, whoever that is, could be monitoring these dashboards, making sure data is consistently coming in as accurate, finding any red flags, if there's anything with freshness of data, just an ability to stay on top of things and make sure that you're always looking at the right set of data. Last thing to touch on here is also going to be the ability to do ad hoc analysis. So on top of the dashboards that we'll have configured and pre-built for you, you'll also have the ability to connect to these data sources, because they're going to be structured in a way that's going to support the reporting, that you can go in, with a blank Tableau workbook, for example, connect to your reporting layer, bring in different attributes and metrics, and really slice the data, slice and dice it as you need to do the reporting and answer questions on the fly as needed as well. Now that now we talked through the solution as it looks as a whole, I wanted to go through a few considerations while implementing it as we get closer to then doing a live demo. So first consideration I want to touch on is really this idea of master data management, or MDM. And the important part here being, you want to get ahead of this as soon as possible. Document what relationships, what business rules there are out there, what needs to be maintained between different data sets, where this is all going to live and happen. It might be a robust solution at an enterprise MDM tool, or maybe it's even in more of a light solution being handled offline. But regardless of the fact, you want to make sure that you have the process and you have it documented. And then from there, just clearly establishing what the roles and responsibilities are for handling this. So thinking of it in terms of, are we maintaining things on a daily basis, weekly, monthly, or what even has to be done ad hoc to kind of keep the lights on and keep the system going. And the reason I wanted to take time to touch on this is because it's something we've seen, time and time again. It's so easy to overlook on an implementation, but really can't stress the importance enough, because this is ultimately what's going to pull everything together and ensure a successful solution, consistency across the board, and ultimately adoption from you and the rest of your team. The next consideration I wanted to touch on was just making sure you have a clear governance plan in place. So things you want to consider here, establishing the roles and responsibilities, having regular steering committee touch points with all the active stakeholders, creating and maintaining a report inventory. So having a clearly defined plan for how you might promote or productionalize new reports as the solution evolves. So thinking of maybe you have certain reports that are going to be going out to leadership or externally. You want to make sure that you have more rigor around those, versus maybe there's a report that's being used more for more ad hoc analysis within a smaller business unit. It's going to be different. It's not necessarily one size fits all there. Also want to make sure in that same vein, just defining the proper access control and security model, making sure that you're going to have sensitive information available in these dashboards. So making sure that people are only accessing the levels of information that they should be. So, if a department owner is only supposed to see information as it relates to their area, setting up the security in a way to do so, so that then it makes it that much easier when you're onboarding new team members as well. So, bringing them in, giving them that right level of access from the start, and also making sure that they're getting the proper training that they need. So maybe you have some recorded training videos that they can go through, some exercises that go along with that. And just making sure that they ultimately feel that they have all the tools they need to be successful, because that's what's going to drive continued adoption going forward. Last piece I want to touch on here is just making sure you have the right support plan and communication in place to all the key stakeholders. So whether there's an issue that comes up, maybe there's some new functionality that you want to update, include as an enhancement, understanding what's the process for requesting this, what's the process for raising issues, and then how is this all going to be prioritized, resolved, and communicated to the rest of the team. Having these things defined ahead of time is really going to help make sure that the whole team understands what's going on, and having a healthy solution and going forward successfully. So kind of putting that all together, you then end up with your Supplier 360 solution, that dynamic, living, breathing set of dashboards available, which we'll walk through in our demo. So as I mentioned, we'll now walk through a demo solution of something we've implemented in the past, just to show you some of the possible features and functionality you can expect within the S360 platform. From this, we'll begin by going through the demo of a supplier comparison exercise. So maybe you're considering a new supplier for services that you need, how you might look at new suppliers versus existing that you have. From there, going into a little bit of a deeper spend analysis on the suppliers you're considering, and then ultimately pivoting over to looking at an existing supplier review. So thinking of, what are some patterns, things you might want to look at as it relates to risk, financial information, contract of those existing suppliers, and doing a little bit of a deeper dive into the contracts and purchase orders to make sure things look good. As a note, just before jumping in, what you'll see here is definitely meant to be a demo of what's possible. So example of what is possible. We've built this specific demo as a life sciences point of view, but want to highlight here that this can really be customized across industries, whatever your company's specific needs and priorities are. And the key thing here is that we're really bringing all the important data together in one place, and there's opportunity to iterate and extend upon not only the data sets coming in, but the functionality of the dashboard to continue answering the right questions, even as those questions evolve for your business. So with that said, we'll jump into Tableau and walk through the demo. All right, so in the dashboard here, first example I want to walk through now is looking at a supplier overview. So what do we mean by this is having a starting point of a filterable table that you can use to evaluate potential new suppliers against some of your existings across different commodity offerings in the space that you might be using at your company. So at the top, we have a number of filters that you can use to kind of help drive the selections, limit this table to what's going to be a little bit more relevant for your analysis. And just to go through an example of how you might use this. So say you're working for a pharmaceutical company, life sciences industry, and that you're going to have a new oncology therapeutic area study upcoming, and you want to make sure you have the right clinical trial services in place that are going to be outsourced and help you be successful. So one way you might want to use this dashboard is first looking at some of these filters. So we have commodity as an example. If I click on that, we can start limiting in, removing some of the noise that's not going to be as relevant to this situation, and really focusing in, let's look at our clinical services. So we can go in, check that, hit apply, and then it's going to ultimately update here to show just clinical. Apologies for that. I had the dashboard pulled up before the demo, and it just need a second to refresh here. Yeah, so now that we have this view, we could see, okay, now we have, we're going from hundreds of suppliers that we're looking at now to 5. So it's a little bit more manageable to see what's really relevant here. So, right off the bat, we might see, hey, there's 5 suppliers here. 3 of these are current suppliers. 2 of these are new that we haven't even worked with yet. So, we might have been suppliers we've considered, business partners gone in, made sure they were added into the system because they're part of the process review for the vendor selection. So we have these in. We might want to look from here and see, hey, how did these suppliers relate to risk? So, for example, we see 2 of these suppliers, one that's currently being used by the company and one that isn't, have a risk score of 3. That's pretty high. So it's, moderate to high risk. And, we know this is an important clinical trial that we're working through. I don't know that we want to necessarily go with a 3. And, it might even prompt the conversation that we want to reach back out to whoever is owning the vital care relationship and making sure that they understand, some of the risk involved in there, and do some due diligence just to make sure things are going to be okay and whatever else they're supporting. But, in terms of looking at a new vendor selection, we might want to go to this risk score toggle. Let's drop it down to 2. We don't want to look at anything higher than a 2. So we only want to look at some of these low to, moderate risk. From here, we see, we're working with 2 companies currently, Columbia Pharma and DRS Pharma. We have Precision Med Labs, which we haven't worked with yet, and they actually have a pretty favorable risk score. So, this is one where we might want to do a little research and see, hey, are they one company that is applicable in this situation, or maybe somebody we want to even consider for the future. But if we want to just start our focus in on who we're working with now, we can do a little bit more analysis that way. So to kind of get into that piece a little bit more, I'll click on Columbia Pharma Global. And then go into our Supplier 360 spend review dashboard. And that's going to take us into a supplier spend detailed review. So from here, we have a number of filters. So they'll work similarly to what they looked like on the previous screen we were looking at. But since this is more going to be a spend-related dashboard, this is really going to focus on some more of your spend-related attributes. So thinking of different GL segments potentially in your ERP system, maybe a little bit more of a detailed break on commodity, different areas of that nature. But if we start kind of from left to right, looking at this dashboard, what it's going to really show you is, in the top section, you have your supplier information. So you have your DUNS ID, which you'll also notice when I went into the drop down, we had it appended to the supplier name. This is just the ID that's used by Dun & Bradstreet to kind of have consistency around different companies, and it can tie the risk relationship to it. So we're using this as kind of that unique identifier to go back to a D&B, grab the risk information and integrate it all together. It's definitely optional whether you want to display this or not. We find that it was helpful in this situation just so you can kind of clearly see that linkage. But then as you go into a little more, you'll have some address information, some website. You can even go into. Sorry, I'm having looks like I'm just having a little bit of internet connectivity issues, so I'm just coming back to the dashboard here. You can then see, address, website. In this case, this has been a preferred supplier since, sorry, this is going back to the correct one, since 2001. So we've had an established relationship with this supplier for over 20 years. And then if I were to, hover over the middle, we can see a little bit more detail as it relates to some, diversity information. Is it minority owned, small business, risk information, getting some more detail into that. And then going to the next section, we'll really now get an overview of our company's relationship with this supplier. So starting to see, how much money have we spent with the supplier over time? Again, having the risk score there just to see it all pulled together. How many active contracts do we have with this organization? How many are expiring? When are those expiring? How many different sites are we working with? So, as you're working with more larger suppliers, and the relationships get more complex, you might be working with different sites, and those sites might have their own owners, managers that are working with different managers on our team. So just being able to have that information up front so that you can have a starting point of where to dive deep into. Going a little deeper into kind of the example we were talking about here. So if you think about, we wanted to look at potential oncology study. So maybe for therapeutic area, let's click on this therapeutic area. That's going to filter the rest of our dashboard down to oncology, because we really just want to look at this. This is our most relevant use case. We want to kind of focus in our analysis here. So what that's going to do is that's really going to filter everything down. So we see, our spend, we're focused on this 8.9 million related to oncology. We can kind of get a sense of how that breaks down by different business units, cost centers, accounts. And, potentially we're looking at this and we see, hey, a few of these top projects that we've spent on with this supplier are actually pretty similar, relevant to the current trial that we're going to be running. So, that's, potentially a reason we might want to work with this supplier in this case. Having gone through that, we might say, but before we make a decision, before we go back to our business partner, let's look at the other supplier we were considering. So I'll go back into our dropdown. I'm going to pick the DRS. They were the other one we were considering that we're working with there. And we'll see, any filter we selected before, that's still going to hold. So, we're filtered on our oncology. So looking at the 17.2 million as it relates here. In this case, we see pretty different supplier relationships. So, less time that we've had this as a preferred supplier since 2017, but also just have done a lot more volume of business with this supplier. So seeing, we've spent over 133 million in the renal space with them. And, maybe that's not as relevant to this study, but just something worth noting and being able to see. We'll also note, as we scroll down, maybe some of the spend breakdowns are a little different as well, even within oncology. So, we saw before a lot of the spend was related to outsourced testing and was spread pretty evenly across projects. In this case, maybe there's more of an emphasis on program and project management. And it looks like, the spend information can be a little more skewed here, where we really worked more on the biomed project. And that's all to say, just kind of different data points that you can have that now when you go back to your business partner working on this, you can say, hey, okay, is the biomed study that we worked on the most relevant in this case? Or do we want to go with the kind of the tried and true supplier that has been our oncology go-to for years? Or do we want to go with, this new supplier we've been working with that we've spent a lot more with, and they can also support these services? And kind of going into that meeting, armed with those data points, you can kind of answer some questions and start to make decisions on that. And then, as you're going through, you can there as well. So you may hit a point where you want to just start looking at different suppliers. So kind of zoom your view back out, go back into your drop down, and maybe start looking at different areas. So you have the ability to go in, select different suppliers, do similar analysis there. Next case I wanted to touch upon was just going back to our overall overview that we had here and looking at what do things look like if we wanted to view things more holistically. So maybe we're doing a quarterly or annual review of all our suppliers and some upcoming considerations we might have. So getting back to this tab here, I'm going to just make sure, looks like all the filters have already been removed. So making sure we have our full starting point. First, maybe we want to look across the board, all new suppliers we're considering and to see how it relates to the different commodities. So to help with that, I'll go into current supplier, select no. That's going to update this to just now show us new suppliers we're considering. And as we can see here, hey, there's quite a few that are, risk category of 4, pretty high risk to look at here. So we see this corporate G&A partners coming across multiple commodities. So it looks like, maybe they're a firm that specializes in G&A related services. And we want to talk to that business partner to see, hey, just want to understand, why we're considering working with this business, and are you aware of some of the risk related to their financial status? Just having some of that discussion before we jump in, make any big investments, which we potentially end up regretting down the line. We also may want to kind of flip things the other way. Maybe we want to start seeing our existing suppliers and how it relates there. So if I remove this filter, go back, select yes for our suppliers. We see overall across the board who we're working currently, it's a lot more healthy, with a lot of 0, 1s, and 2s, but there are still some 3s and 4s to keep an eye on. So there's this AA Co Global, which we might want to, have some discussions to understand, what exactly is going on there. Maybe same idea with this Quantum Cargo, just to inform some of those discussions. So, as we did before, we could either click in, start doing the deep dive, or we might decide, let's actually drill into some more of the financials, still looking at it at a high enough level. To do that, what I would do is just go to this current supplier review, which is going to give us a very similar view to what we were seeing before, but you're going to notice it's a lot smaller because now we're filtered on, all right, who are our current suppliers we're doing business with that we actually have active contracts, open POs with, understanding the relationship a little bit better from that angle. So as we saw before in this AA Co Global, we still see, the risk score, that high risk score that came through. Another red flag we're seeing is this PO overages. So in this case, we're seeing, in a number of contracts we've worked on with this group, 2 of them, we've spent more than the original budgeted purchase order. So definitely something we want to keep in mind. Maybe it's even kind of a reason to have a conversation with Emily, who's our vendor relationship manager at the company, understand what's going on there. Maybe we need to strategize ahead of, some upcoming renewals with Ava on the vendor side, how we go into those discussions. We might also want to look at, from an expiring contract perspective. So you think of the Stratos DB Corp, 39 active contracts, quite a few contracts expiring, within the year. We wanted to, look at even closer timeline. If we want to say, let's look 2 months out, filter this toggle down a little bit to 60. We see actually, a good number of these 30 are expiring in the next 60 days. We really need to make sure we're getting ahead of this, having the conversations, getting a plan in place to, make sure we're set with these services if needed going further. So, what we can do from there, similar to before, we can, click on this. It's going to bring us back to our original spend overview dashboard. And we can now start going through doing similar analysis to what we did before. So maybe in this case, I know, hey, billable expenses is where the bulk of these contracts we have right now are with the Stratos DB. So I'm going to click on this spend by cost center, have that really be the focus and zero in on this 5 million that we're spending. From here, maybe there's not a large enough sample in terms of, the spend breakdowns at the business unit or segment level. We really want to go into a deeper level looking at purchase orders and individual contracts. So from that perspective, I may want to even go into our supplier contract review, and carry over that filter that we have. So we're still looking at this 5 million or so in spend and start looking at the individual purchase orders and contracts. Within this, you might decide, hey, I already know the POs that in mind that I need to look at. So you could start typing it in, or, maybe the first few digits and it's a group of purchase orders together that you want to look. So you could start typing, searching, kind of limit the scope to that so that you're focused in on the right areas, starting to look at, your invoice amount as it relates to the total purchase order. Maybe you want to look more on the contract side. So for example, one of these expiring contracts could be this biomaterials supply agreement. You notice here that you look at it and you see, out of the 290K that we had agreed upon, we've only burned about 76% of that. So there's still around 70K left to spend there. This contract's expiring pretty soon. Maybe we need to have some conversations to understand, hey, do we anticipate needing to extend the terms of this contract, or do we want to repurpose the funds here to another contract with Stratos DB? Or, if the services are no longer needed after this point, do we even want to reallocate these funds to a different area of the business? So really all to say, just a few examples wanted to walk through of how you might use the solution, but it really is meant to be, you have different levels that you can look at, from an overview, bringing multiple suppliers together to being able to drill in to more detailed analysis and, ultimately have these scenarios you can walk through, get the detailed information you need to answer questions. So with that said, I'll turn it back over to Nico, who's going to walk us through a case study.
All right. Thank you, Anthony. So now that we've seen Supplier 360 and seen the capabilities of what it can do, let's learn a little bit more about a particular use case where a client not only got the end result, but actually started to see significant annual savings by having access to this data. And certainly the point being of how powerful this data can be. So to set the stage, this company is a global pharmaceutical company. They transitioned to a shared services model in the recent years. And the point of that is they have entities all over the country and all over the globe where now they have the opportunity to bring all of this data together. The challenge with that, though, is that they were doing this manually at the time. So even though their sourcing team wanted to look for cost savings opportunities and how they could eliminate redundancies in the business, it was incredibly time consuming for them to do that. And then they didn't necessarily get to prioritize or spend the time on a larger group of suppliers to focus on that. And even on the day-to-day side, people would come to the procurement teams asking, hey, where are we at with this contract? Or what's the spend looking like compared to the original contract agreement for a particular initiative with the supplier? And they had to go and cobble this data together from various systems to get that answer to them. So ultimately very time-consuming processes, which means lost time and not having the ability to focus on those cost savings opportunities as it relates to then driving more informed negotiations with suppliers. So they had a new head of strategic sourcing and procurement join the organization, and he had a vision around this, and he had done something similar like this in companies before. So certainly talked to us, brought us in and said, hey, how can we actually bring all of this data together and make it easier for my team to be able to do what they need to do to drive not only cost savings, but become better business partners to their internal stakeholders. So what we set out to do is we said, well, let's understand what we're looking to accomplish first. So this involved a lot of process analysis, upfront assessments, discussions, and workshops with the various departments across the organization to then understand where there might be gaps, challenges, bottlenecks as it relates to the data. And then from there, we started to more inform and develop that data strategy. So, what systems are we pulling data from? What does our supplier master data process look like? Because that was a big challenge for them. They thought on paper they knew exactly how they wanted to manage their supplier master data. And once we started getting into it and prototyping design, it opened up a lot of other questions, which was really good that we brought in cross-functional teams early on to say, hey, here's how we use supplier attribution. Here's how we do it over here. And really getting aligned then to inform this true master strategy with their suppliers. And then from there, once we aligned the discussions and the processes, who was involved, the expectations, then it was a matter of actually designing and building out the data infrastructure to support all this. So pulling data from their ERP, which was Oracle eBusiness Suite, pulling data from their contract management system, iCertis, pulling data from other ERPs across other entities like SAP and bringing and aligning all that data together. And then certainly you think about risk data, bringing in data from Dun and Bradstreet to enrich the supplier data as well as provide health information on those suppliers. And this is just the beginning, certainly giving them a lot of information around their suppliers, but even wanting to make this more holistic in the future, starting to talk about bringing in data from other internal systems like survey data. How did our projects actually go, or how was their experience working with these suppliers? And now starting to inform and enrich that supplier data even more. Are they in line with our compliance expectations? And just filling out all of those standards that were ultimately very important to this client. And certainly you can see from the testimonial, but the biggest thing is there was the soft savings as it relates to time. So certainly freeing up people's time. But the biggest impact around this was the hard costs and hard cost savings around those negotiations with suppliers because they could truly start to build more strategic partnerships with their key suppliers, which allowed them to save money, certainly in the short term, but they expect even more savings in the future as they start to use this data to build more and more relationships. So, just one example of how people are using the power of data to more inform their strategies within sourcing and procurement. So, if we summarize everything here and take a look at what we discussed today, I think we can all agree that data is power. But the question becomes, how do you get that data? How long does it take for you to get that data? And then what are you actually doing with it? So to bring it back to what we were originally discussing, so many of you are probably using data today to do that, but it just takes so long to pull all that information together. So, which then brings us to let's use the power of technology and automation to eliminate those manual tasks that your team is so inundated with on a regular basis and start freeing up their time to focus more on the strategic part of strategic sourcing and procurement. And that way they can start executing against that vision of how we want to build strategic partnerships with our suppliers, how we can then drive cost savings associated with that. And then, of course, how we can be a better business partner across our organization, which is why working cross functionally is so critical to even an initiative like this. Because even though you might be bringing in people to this project and they have small responsibilities involved with it, getting them involved very early on in this type of initiative is going to make it that much more successful because people set aside time for this. They know when they're involved, they know what their role is. And then they're also able to see, oh, what value am I getting out of this project as well? So it's trying to build some excitement within your organization so people start to see the direction you're going and what your vision is and have that so everyone's aligned from that perspective. And then I think just closing out here, I mean, with any type of data project, initiative, or just anything within your organization, today's such a challenging world to be part of. You have remote work environments, so many different things going on in people's lives. Really leading with empathy in any of these initiatives is going to make all the difference for your organization. It's going to build trust with the people that you're going to work with on a daily basis, as well as people who are involved in this initiative and may not be normally in your day-to-day work. And by doing that, it's really just going to make things so much more successful in your organization. You're going to start to build better relationships. And then once you're armed with the power of that data, people are going to start seeing you as a trusted strategic sourcing and procurement business partner, so you can finally start getting the respect that you ultimately deserve. So I want to thank you all for attending this webinar, and certainly want to give you a chance to ask any questions as well.
All right, I'll start reading the Q&As that were submitted, and as a reminder, just submit any if you have them. Okay, so first question, how long does it take to implement something like this?
Yeah, I'll take that one. Yeah, so I would say we've done different implementations and really seen it vary case to case. So what I mean by that is, one client we've had where, it was a matter of taking all of the data, making sure that it was all put in place where they were starting truly from scratch with, all the source systems, data in disparate areas, tying it all together. That type of project, took a little on the longer side, 3 to 6 months, where maybe you think you're in a different company where, hey, you're already on a sourcing platform. You've done some of the heavy lifting to get all your information, definitions, and everything put together, where now it's more just an emphasis on the analytics. Maybe that's a shorter project, 1 to 3 months, which, we've also seen at another client. So it really can vary, and it's going to be dependent on that data component of where you are.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I'll add too is sometimes it's just even a matter of starting to see what that data can look like on a dashboard. So it doesn't mean you need to go build out this robust data infrastructure if you don't already have it. But even if you start pulling together some of those end spreadsheets that you've used in the past, and then we can start to expose those in this type of dashboard very, very quickly within a matter of weeks. And then you start to see the value of, okay, here's the metrics I actually think are most important for the philosophy of how you run your sourcing and procurement teams. And then from there, back into more of, okay, well, let's prioritize building out this data set. And then it's a lot more informed, it's a lot more strategic, and the execution can be on that within a month as well, once you start prototyping that early on. So I think even if you're doing this internally in your organization and you're working with your IT and data teams, just focus on a proof of concept first before embarking on this massive journey, because it's going to make things so much easier and you're going to get a lot more value much quicker as well.
All right, and next question, what size companies do you typically work with for this solution?
Yeah, so in the implementations we've done, we've worked with smaller clients to mid-size, and then even a larger, more enterprise client in certain situations. So it really all depends, and it's going to be kind of back to the previous question of where you are on your journey, and whether it means coming in and we start with the proof of concept, kind of get the analytic piece of it in place, and then kind of go into the data. It really, can vary, and we've done it in different situations with clients of different sizes.
Yeah, and I think one other thing I'd like to add to that too, if you think of more, even if true enterprise companies who they might already have this robust built out sourcing platform, if you will, so many opportunities that we've seen is those opportunities that they didn't necessarily expect. And what I mean by that is, because they're a global organization, is they're going to have several entities either through acquisition, merger, that have occurred over the years that haven't necessarily been integrated into their core systems. And there's never that granularity of the data as it relates to suppliers. That's even a more massive opportunity, because you start saying, oh, we're actually having a lot of redundancies across even our entities in similar regions. And then you start to, because now you're driving all this data across all of these entities together, then you can start to identify even some more of those significant cost savings. So I say that because it doesn't necessarily matter if you have no system or you have the most robust system in place. A lot of it depends on your organizational structure and where that data is siloed about your suppliers in the first place.
All right, and that's all we have for questions.
Great. All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate everyone attending the webinar today, and certainly feel free to contact us. I think we have our emails on the next slide if you have any additional questions, and if you need any help along this journey to bring your data together. So thank you.